Hello. A group of Colombians was roaming the streets of Miami. They were members of a notorious gang known as the Cocaine Cowboys. Their destination was a shopping center, and their target was a liquor store. Their mission is to eliminate a rival gang dealing cocaine. When the assassins arrived, they shocked everyone with a bold execution in broad daylight. The result was the deaths of two notorious cocaine dealers at the scene, while two innocent store employees were seriously injured. The sheer disregard for human life at the crime scene sent shockwaves through South Florida like never before. Later, the police found a specially modified truck they believed belonged to the assassins. This war truck was armored with 6mm thick steel and had gun ports cut into the sides. Inside, they discovered a cache of modern weapons. At the time, police officers were still using 6-shot revolvers, while these killers were equipped with Uzi submachine guns, leaving the police completely stunned by the situation. All the victims were Colombian drug dealers, so the police decided to search for clues within the Colombian immigrant community in Miami. However, no one had the courage to speak up, making the investigation extremely difficult. These Colombians were very tight-lipped because the massacre was part of something far more dangerous. At that time, Miami saw a sudden spike in the murder rate, with killings rising from about 80 to 100 per year to nearly 300 to 400. Police frequently found bodies shot dead in cars, restaurants, or other public places. The city had about 100,000 criminals and 350 rival gangs slaughtering each other to gain control over drug territory. The murders were brutal, and they were all connected to a new booming business in Miami: cocaine trafficking. Cocaine was being imported into Miami by the ton via boats, planes, and hidden in shipments. No longer just an expensive drug reserved for lavish celebrity parties. Cocaine fueled a new wave of organized crime. It became easily accessible on the streets and was destroying the lives of millions of U.S. Miami police were determined to find out which Colombian kingpin was behind these bloody executions. They began questioning street-level drug dealers, threatening to imprison them unless they provided information about their suppliers. The dealers started talking, and they all mentioned one name: Griselda Blanco, the queen of cocaine. Griselda Blanco. The Colombian drug Queenpin entered the cocaine trade in the early 1970s when Pablo Escobar was still stealing cars to make a living. At the height of her career, Blanco was believed to be smuggling over $80 million worth of cocaine into the U.S. each month. What made Blanco stand out was her terrifying ruthlessness. Blanco became one of the most dangerous cocaine traffickers in the world, believed to have ordered at least 250 murders and possibly connected to as many as 2,000. If you owed her money and refused to pay, she would kill you. If you paid her late, she would kill you. Sometimes she killed people just for amusement. So how did a young girl who grew up in poverty on the harsh streets of Colombia manage to build a multi-billion-dollar drug empire? In today's story, we will delve into the life and career of Griselda Blanco. This story is intended to inform and educate, not to glorify or romanticize criminal activities. Griselda Blanco was born on February 15, 1943, in Cartagena, Colombia, on the country's northern coast. Blanco lived with her mother, Anna, in a poor slum outside the city. Her neighborhood, Barrio Antioquia, was a crime-ridden area filled with gangsters and murderers. Blanco grew up in such a notorious criminal district that it was designated as a tolerance zone, meaning it was the city's red light district, where illegal activities elsewhere were legalized. Blanco began her life of crime by picking pockets, but she quickly escalated. According to reports, when she was just 11 years old, she and her friends kidnapped a boy from an affluent neighborhood for ransom. When the boy's parents didn't take the threat seriously, Blanco, without hesitation, took the boy's life, becoming a cold-blooded killer before even reaching her teenage years. This was a clear sign that she would stop at nothing to get what she wanted. At 13, Blanco had an older boyfriend named Carlos Trujillo, a Colombian human trafficker. Over 5 years, he taught her the dark tricks of forging passports, and she quickly became an expert in creating fake identities. Together, they smuggled thousands of people into the U.S. By the age of 19, Blanco and Carlos were married and had 3 sons. However, by the late 1960s, Blanco divorced Carlos and later killed him over a business dispute. Not long after, Blanco met and married Alberto Bravo. Unlike human trafficking, Bravo dealt in cocaine, and by the early 1970s, he had amassed a fortune of $26,000, a huge sum at the time. In Medellin, the fastest way to get rich was by transporting cocaine to the U.S., where it was often sold for 10 times the price it commanded in Colombia. So like many others, Bravo and Blanco decided to chase the American dream. In the early 1970s, Bravo and Blanco illegally immigrated to New York. They settled in Queens and quickly expanded their cocaine distribution network. The constant challenge was how to safely transport cocaine into the U.S. With her cunning mind, Blanco devised a special type of clothing that allowed drugs to be hidden around the body, making them look like the natural curves of women. She only selected Colombian women to act as drug mules and trained them to flaunt their bodies to distract border agents. Blanco encouraged these women to dress seductively and flirt with customs officers. No one suspected that these elegantly dressed, alluring women were smuggling cocaine hidden in their bras. These mules landed in New York, where Blanco's underground distribution network awaited, and within hours cocaine flooded the streets. By the mid-1970s, Griselda Blanco and her husband, Alberto Bravo, had earned around $500 million in cash from their drug business. This was also when Pablo Escobar first emerged in the drug trade, fueling the business boom. Bravo returned to Colombia to restructure their export network. However, this wave of cocaine drew the attention of the New York Police and the Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA. They launched a secret operation called Operation Banshee to trace the origins of the cocaine. Operation Banshee led to Blanco and over 30 of her associates being indicted on federal drug conspiracy charges in April 1975. It was the largest cocaine case in U.S. history at the time. However, when federal agents arrived to arrest Blanco, she had vanished without a trace. Blanco used every trick her ex-husband Carlos Trujillo, a document forging specialist, had taught her, making it impossible for law enforcement to track her. Each time she moved, she used a different fake identity. An agent central to Operation Banshee, Bob Palumbo, recalled, "We had enough evidence to charge her with drug trafficking conspiracy, but she completely disappeared without a trace." In reality, Blanco had slipped out of the U.S. and returned to Colombia just before the indictment. She returned not only to avoid capture, but also to confront her husband, Bravo, as she was dissatisfied with how he managed their massive cocaine empire. Blanco suspected that Bravo had embezzled millions of dollars from their profits. After a heated argument in the parking lot of a nightclub outside Bogota, Blanco pulled a gun and shot Bravo dead, earning her the nickname the Black Widow. With the death of her second husband, Blanco gained complete control of her drug empire. However, as Blanco's power grew, she faced a new and formidable rival, Pablo Escobar, the leader of a ruthless cartel encroaching on her territory. Escobar, known as the King of Cocaine, became the wealthiest criminal in history, turning Bogota, Colombia, into the death capital of the world. By the end of 1975, Blanco and Escobar were locked in a deadly battle, each with their own teams of assassins hunting and eliminating one another. Blanco realized that to protect her massive cocaine empire from Escobar's competition, she had to escalate her violent tactics. She pioneered bold assassination methods using motorcycles, a signature move on the streets of Medellin. These reckless actions kept Escobar on guard. Ultimately, Escobar bribed officials to take control of the Medellin airport, which became Blanco's main distribution route into the U.S. Pushed out of Medellin by Escobar and fleeing the DEA in New York, Blanco had no place left to return to in her Colombian homeland. Yet with her talent for disguise and ability to vanish like a ghost, Blanco once again eluded all pursuits. 3 years after Operation Banshee began, the DEA's hunt for the Black Widow in New York hit a dead end. Agents wondered if she had retired from the cocaine trade or perhaps had been killed. However, in 1976, a series of events in Florida provided a new lead. Organized crime had spread across the sunny paradise of Florida, with Miami becoming the focal point. The DEA began to suspect that the Black Widow was no longer in hiding but had returned to the U.S. Through sources, customs officials finally identified her, and they were able to put a face to the feared name at last. Facing arrest warrants and dangers from New York's mafia, Blanco relocated to a new place, Miami, where she quickly rose to become the queen of cocaine. In 1978, she married her third husband, Dario Sepulveda, a bank robber, and that same year her fourth son, Michael Corleone, was born. She named her son after the character in Al Pacino's The Godfather, and the title Godfather seemed to become the guiding principle of Blanco's criminal actions. Blanco's arrival in Miami was pivotal, as the local cocaine market was then controlled by a group of Cuban exiles and a few renegade Americans. However, Miami had become the gateway to the Latin American underworld, and Blanco was not satisfied with sharing profits. She wanted to dominate the entire drug market. By the late 1970s, with the support of a team of hitmen led by Jorge Rivi Ayala, Blanco launched a violent campaign to eliminate her rivals and expand her territory. As her rivals were gradually eliminated, Blanco grew even wealthier in Miami, living a life of luxury with lavish homes, expensive cars, and even a private jet. She hosted wild parties attended by many influential figures in the criminal world. Although she had been driven out of Medellin, Blanco and Pablo Escobar continued their conflict in Miami. The competition between various factions, including the Medellin cartel, escalated the violence. From 1979 to 1984, South Florida became a true war zone. The Miami Drug War, also known as the Cocaine Cowboy era, officially began on July 11, 1979, when the Ruthless Cocaine Cowboys gang assassinated a rival in broad daylight at the Dadeland Mall. Police believed that Blanco had set up her headquarters in Miami and was the instigator behind the bloody gang wars. By the early 1980s, 70% of the cocaine and marijuana entering the U.S. came through Miami, and the death toll began to skyrocket. In the first 5 months of 1980, Miami witnessed 75 murders, and that number rose to 175 in the last 7 months of the year. By 1981, Miami had become not only the murder capital of the U.S., but of the world, with Blanco at the center of this storm. Blanco instilled fear in everyone, including other drug lords. While others killed with a purpose, Blanco killed without reason. Her most trusted hitman, Rivi Ayala, later recounted that when Blanco ordered a hit, not only the target, but anyone in the vicinity, including women and children, had to die. During her bloody reign in Florida, the Black Widow ordered up to 200 retaliatory assassinations each month. Her empire was smuggling over a ton of cocaine into the U.S. and generating $80 million in monthly profits. By late 1983, Blanco's third husband, Dario Sepulveda, had grown tired of life in Miami and had fallen in love with another woman. He kidnapped their son, Michael Corleone, and returned to Colombia. When Blanco found out, she was so enraged that she hired hitmen in her homeland to disguise themselves as police and shoot Dario dead right in front of their son. Despite the growing number of enemies, but Blanco continued to escalate the violence. One example of her brutality was when she ordered the torture and murder of a Mexican drug supplier because she did not want to repay the $1.8 million she owed him. The victim's body was later dumped in a canal. Blanco did not hesitate to kill a member of the Ochoa family, who, along with Pablo Escobar, had founded the Medellin cartel. These were not people who forgave easily, and Blanco's actions sparked their desire for revenge. Meanwhile, both Miami police and the DEA believed that Blanco was behind the numerous street massacres, but had no idea where she was operating from. To bring Blanco to justice, they needed to lure her out of hiding and gather enough solid evidence to convict her. Finally, through an informant, the DEA got close to Blanco's son, Dixon Trujillo. Through investigations and wiretapping, the police discovered that Blanco had relocated to Irvine, California, to avoid pressure from enemies and law enforcement in Miami. After a decades-long pursuit, the authorities could not let the Black Widow slip through their fingers again. Within months, all three of Blanco's sons were arrested in DEA drug operations. In 1985, Blanco was sentenced to nearly 20 years in prison for drug trafficking, marking a new chapter in her life behind bars. Charles Cosby, a cocaine dealer in Orlando, had been following the news of Blanco's arrest and decided to try reaching out to her through a mutual acquaintance. Alpanamanian woman named Manuela After being introduced, Cosby began writing letters to Blanco, gradually moving to phone contact, and finally, after about 9 months, he visited her in person at FCI Dublin, a federal women's prison in California. Their relationship quickly progressed, with Cosby recalling that during the first visit Blanco agreed to give him 50 kilograms of cocaine to sell as a test. After succeeding in earning $2 million, Cosby received another 100 kilograms the following month and sold it all. From then on, he became both her lover and business partner. With the help of bribed prison staff, Cosby claimed that from 1986 to around 1997, despite being in prison, Blanco continued to run her cocaine empire, earning around $50 million annually. However, as time passed and Blanco's release date approached, she realized that the Miami District Attorney's Office was planning to prosecute her for first-degree murder in Florida, with the death penalty looming over her. The biggest blow came in 1994 when Rivy Ayala, Blanco's most loyal hitman, became the key witness in the case against her. This devastated Blanco, as Ayala had enough evidence to send her to the electric chair multiple times. In her desperation, Blanco devised a bold plan. According to Charles Cosby, she secretly passed him a note with the scribbled characters JFK 5 Nay. Confused, Cosby asked Blanco what it meant, and she explained that it was a plan to kidnap John F. Kennedy Jr., the son of the late President John F. Kennedy, in New York in exchange for her freedom. They intended to hold Kennedy hostage until Blanco was released and sent to Colombia, while the kidnappers would also receive a $5 million ransom. According to Cosby, he didn't want to be involved in Blanco's crazy scheme, which led to the end of their relationship, but Blanco remained determined to carry out the plan without Cosby. Rumor has it that the kidnappers almost succeeded when they surrounded John F. Kennedy Jr. while he was walking his dog. However, a passing police patrol car scared them off, forcing them to flee. With the kidnapping plan foiled, Blanco's time was running out. If Rivy Ayala testified against her, she would undoubtedly be sentenced to death. However, luck was on her side when a sex scandal involving Ayala and clerks in the prosecutor's office was exposed, forcing the prosecutor to make a deal with Blanco. As a result, she avoided the death penalty and was sentenced to an additional 7 years in prison. By 2004, Blanco was released and deported to Colombia at the age of 61. By then, the old gangs had disbanded, allowing Blanco to live peacefully for another 8 years in Medellin. However, in 2012, at the age of 69, Blanco met a grim fate. She was shot twice in the head at a butcher shop in Medellin in a motorcycle assassination, the very method of killing she had pioneered years before. Blanco's assassin remains unidentified to this day. For the agents who had spent decades hunting her, this outcome was not surprising. Her history of drug dealing and life on the run had proven that the drug trade is a dead-end path, and the fate of drug lords inevitably leads to their downfall. This story is intended for informational and educational purposes, not to glorify or romanticize criminal activities.
In the 1960s, the counterculture movement began in the USA, with drug use, nudity, and sexual liberation becoming popular trends among the youth. A few years later, a Colombian man established a drug trafficking route from South USA to the USA, transporting over 15 tons of cocaine into the country daily. During that time, he earned $30 billion and became the 7th richest person in the world. He then ran for the presidency of Colombia, but when he lost, he killed 3 presidential candidates, bombed a civilian airplane, destroyed a government building, carried out hundreds of bombings, and killed more than 5,000 people. Eventually, he bribed the military, attacked the National Ministry of Justice, kidnapped 25 Supreme Court judges, killed 11 of them, and escaped. This man was the Colombian drug lord, Pablo Escobar. Pablo started his business as a teenager, initially stealing gravestones, erasing the inscriptions, and then selling them. He later moved on to selling fake lottery tickets, counterfeit degrees, stealing cars, kidnapping for ransom, and smuggling goods. Once to smuggle whiskey, he used coffins to hide the bottles, staging fake funerals to avoid suspicion. As his business grew, he smuggled more and more items, and at its peak, 40 trucks crossed the Panama-Colombia border every day. By the age of 26, he had earned 100 million pesos. And that same year, he discovered an even more lucrative business than smuggling: drug trafficking, specifically cocaine. The first time he trafficked cocaine, it was just 14 kilograms. But Pablo realized that this earned him more money than smuggling 40 truckloads of TVs. To form his own crew in 1975, he killed the notorious local drug lord, Fabio Restrepo, and forcibly took over his operation. At the same time, he invested large sums of money to build drug production laboratories and hired high-paid chemists to refine powdered cocaine from its paste form, making drug transportation much easier. Initially, he bribed many pilots, flight attendants, and passengers to smuggle drugs. But with so many people involved, he wasn't making much money himself. To change this, he collaborated with the Panamanian government to purchase a large area of land in Norman's Cay, 340 kilometers south of Florida, where he built an airport, radar systems, specialized cold storage for cocaine and other infrastructure, creating a major drug transit point. He also hired many bodyguards, Doberman dogs, and other professional armed forces to ensure the safety of Norman's Cay. He then purchased several King airplanes transporting 300 kilograms of cocaine to Norman's Cay daily, and from there it was sent to the USA using dedicated planes. Once in the USA, the drugs were transported to warehouses by car and then distributed to drug dealers, similar to today's express delivery services. Each shipment came with a bill of lading and a delivery receipt, and each cocaine distributor had their own unique code and provided home delivery services. After confirming the delivery location, the two parties would directly exchange trucks, one filled with cash and the other with cocaine. To further improve his drug trafficking efficiency, he purchased 15 large planes and 6 helicopters, directly establishing an aviation fleet that even included jets. A single flight could transport up to 11 tons of cocaine. He began building numerous factories and laboratories in the jungles of Colombia, capable of producing 10,000 kilograms of cocaine in one night. With so many employees, he even constructed schools, hospitals, canteens, and other infrastructure. Not only that, but Pablo also owned many remotely controlled submarines, ships, speedboats, and large trucks to smuggle drugs into the USA around the clock. He continued to hire many high-paid chemists to continuously improve his drug trafficking methods. Through long-term and diligent research, chemists discovered that liquid cocaine could be directly added to wine, dried fish, canned fish, and even soaked into wood and Colombian jeans, or made into PVC pipes, religious statues, and many other items. After being transported to the USA, they could refine the cocaine through reverse chemical reactions. At its peak, he smuggled 15 tons of cocaine into the USA, daily worth more than $1 billion. The Medellin drug cartel he led monopolized 80% of the global cocaine market. Pablo's assets also reached $30 billion, making him the 7th richest person in the world. Every week, the cost of rubber bands used to bundle money alone exceeded $1,000. Hiding the money became a major issue with secret rooms, warehouses, swimming pools, wall cavities, and even his sofas filled with cash. He bought 20 square kilometers of land in his hometown to build the Naples Ranch, an area 2/3 the size of Macau, China. Inside, it had 2 helipads, 27 artificial lakes, 10 villas, 1,700 employees, a go-kart track, a water park, a bullfighting arena, a sculpture park, and a huge wildlife zoo, along with many luxurious cars and yachts. He also turned a coral island in the Caribbean Sea into a private resort. Additionally, he sponsored the Medellin national football team, helping them win the Copa Libertadores, a top club competition in South USA held annually since 1960. This was the most prestigious club football tournament in South USA and marked Colombia's first Copa Libertadores trophy. Not only that, but he also built football fields, multi-sport complexes, and sponsored youth football teams while constructing 250 houses in eastern Medellin to distribute to the poor. Today, that area has become a large residential community with 4,000 houses and 16,000 residents. Through a series of these activities, he successfully built the image of a philanthropist with an increasingly high reputation. At this point, his ambition became clear: to become the president of Colombia and rule the country. Through bribery, he enlisted Alberto Santofimio of the Colombian Liberal Party, successfully becoming the alternate candidate for the House of Representatives. Alberto accepted money and resigned, so Pablo naturally became a congressman. This was the closest he came to his dream. He even represented the Colombian government at the inauguration of the Spanish president, with countless officials proactively greeting him. At that moment, he felt like he was the president of Colombia, but the newly appointed Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara, shattered his beautiful dream by publicly disclosing a previous arrest warrant for Pablo. In May 1976, Pablo was caught by the Medellin police transporting 18 kilograms of cocaine paste from Ecuador. However, he didn't consider it a serious issue. Unable to bribe the judge handling the case, he killed the 2 police officers who arrested him and successfully erased the case. He never expected that someone would find this arrest warrant, and with that, Pablo lost all hope of running for president and was expelled from the House of Representatives. The Colombian Minister of Justice, Rodrigo Lara, then 37 years old, did not stop there. He collaborated with the USA DEA to shut down one of Pablo's cocaine production facilities and seized many small planes, helicopters, and a large amount of cocaine. This completely enraged Pablo, and Lara was about to witness just how brutal an angry drug lord could be. The Colombian government, fearing for Lara's safety, assigned 2 armored vehicles and 2 personal bodyguards to ensure his security. On the evening of April 30th, 1984, the Minister of Justice, Lara, who had just been in office for 8 months, was driving on Route 127 in Bogota when a gunman on a motorcycle approached from behind and opened fire with a machine gun. Lara died on the spot while his 2 bodyguards remained unharmed. This assassination shocked the entire country. The Colombian government not only began cracking down on drug lords, but also planned to pass extradition laws to arrest the drug kingpins and send them to the USA. In a large-scale raid, they captured Pablo's accountant and seized several trucks filled with drug trafficking documents, filling the first floor of the Colombian Supreme Court's archive. This evidence was enough to sentence Pablo to 100 life terms. Desperate, he bribed the M-19 guerrilla forces, also known as the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, providing them with a large quantity of weapons and explosives. At 11:35 a.m. on November 6, 1985, 3 tanks stormed into the parking lot of Colombia's National Justice Department and began firing indiscriminately, simultaneously taking control of the first floor and the main entrance. 25 minutes later, they had killed all the security personnel and completely controlled the National Justice Department, kidnapping 25 Supreme Court justices, of which 11 were killed. The Chief Justice of the Supreme Court was even burned alive, after which they set fire to the National Justice Department. The fire lasted 2 days and 2 nights, completely destroying all of Pablo's criminal evidence. The commander of the M-19 guerrilla forces and 4 other senior commanders also suddenly died, and all the evidence vanished in the fire. These events further enraged the Colombian government, leading to an even harsher crackdown on drug lords. From January 1985 to February 1987, 7 Colombian drug lords were extradited to the USA, including key figures from the Ochoa cartel of the Medellin gang and Norman's K handler Carlos Later. To oppose the extradition treaty, Pablo formed an assassination organization specifically to kill anyone involved in the extradition treaty process, including high-ranking officials, police officers, and even innocent civilians, turning himself from a drug lord into a terrorist. On October 15, 1984, Jorge Ochoa, one of the Medellin gang lords, was arrested in Spain. After being extradited back to Colombia, the drug trafficking organizations openly threatened the government, stating that for every Colombian drug lord extradited, they would kill 10 Colombian judges. Subsequently, they kidnapped a candidate for mayor of Medellin as a hostage, demanding the release of Jorge Ochoa, or else they would kill the hostage. Reluctantly, they had to release Jorge Ochoa. On December 30th, 1987, high-ranking Colombian officials were in disarray, which leads us to the next key figure, Liberal Party presidential candidate Luis Carlos Galán. He publicly criticized Pablo's drug trafficking organization and promised that if elected president, he would extradite all drug lords to the USA. The Colombian people perceived him as tough, a real man running for president, and they were sure to vote for him. His approval rating soared to 60%. Despite Pablo's frantic threats, he not only refused to back down, but also made cracking down on drug lords his campaign slogan. In April 1989, when Gallon was about to deliver a speech at the University of Medellin, the police received a tip-off and promptly discovered a rocket launcher and a car filled with grenades and long-range weapons nearby. The initial assassination attempt failed, which further bolstered Gallon's confidence. When Colombian intelligence received information about an assassination plot and advised Gallon not to attend the Soacha Square rally, he outright refused. At 8 p.m. on August 18, 1989, Gallon, protected by 18 armed bodyguards, stepped onto Soacha Square. As he waved to the crowd and was about to start his speech, a gunman shot him dead on the spot, sending shockwaves throughout Colombia. The police began searching every farm, villa, and Pablo's Napoles ranch. When he woke up, he received the news but remained calm, heading to the bathroom to shave before sitting down for breakfast. His family and friends were worried sick, urging him constantly, let's go, they're coming, they're over there." Pablo, however, said, "Don't panic." Then he calmly put on his sneakers, tied his laces, and slowly headed towards the helicopter to escape to Panama. In exile, Pablo missed Medellin and Colombia immensely. He openly declared his willingness to disband the Medellin drug trafficking cartel and repay over $10 billion in government debt on behalf of Colombia, as long as he wouldn't be extradited. He even offered to serve prison time in Colombia just to be able to die in his homeland, but the then president of Colombia directly refused, leading to Pablo's frenzied retaliation. On August 23, 1989, Pablo bought 3,000 kilograms of ammonium nitrate explosives and a large cache of heavy weapons, declaring a full-scale war against the state. The quantity of explosives was sufficient to completely destroy Colombia's capital, Bogotá. Over the next 3 months, he carried out more than 100 bombings and began targeting Colombian presidential candidate Cesar Gaviria for assassination. The plan was audacious. They found a desperately poor 17-year-old boy and told him that if he secretly recorded others talking on a plane, he would receive $1 million. That day, the boy, wearing new clothes bought by the drug dealers, boarded a plane for the first time. After 6 minutes of climbing to 4,000 meters, he nervously pressed the record button. A bright spark instantly ignited the aircraft's fuel tank, causing a second explosion. None of the 101 passengers and 6 crew members on board survived. Luggage fragments of the fuselage and human remains were scattered across the hillside 5 kilometers south of Bogotá, near Soacha Square. The plane's debris also crushed 3 early rising farmers on their way to work. However, their intended target, Gaviria, had been held back by someone just before boarding and was not on the flight. It's unclear whether Gaviria was furious, but Pablo certainly was. His subordinates quickly began planning another assassination attempt. 9 days later, a car carrying 1,000 kilograms of ammonium nitrate explosives slowly parked beside the Colombian intelligence headquarters, DS. The primary target was the head of DS, General Hugo Martinez. The plan was to wait for him to enter the building and then detonate the car. However, they hadn't anticipated that he would use the underground parking lot instead of the main lobby where the assassins were waiting. The assassin, after waiting in vain, decided to step outside to discuss with the driver what to do next. As soon as the driver saw him step out, he immediately detonated the bomb. The DS building was at the epicenter of the explosion, and its 11-story facade was completely destroyed. The explosion's target, the head of DS, was sitting in his steel-reinforced office on the top floor. Bodies lay outside his office, yet he remained unscathed. Undeniably, his luck was extraordinary. The first attempt with 50 kilograms of explosives resulted in 4 bodyguards dead and 50 injured, but he remained unharmed. The second assassination attempt was thwarted when the police, acting on a tip-off, arrested an assassin and found a car with 100 kilograms of explosives, 15 kilograms of bombs, numerous detonators and fuses, yet he still was unscathed. The third attempt with 1,000 kilograms of explosives destroyed 26 surrounding neighborhoods, killed 63, and injured over 1,000, but again, he remained unharmed. The failed assassination attempts only made Pablo more frenzied. He began indiscriminate attacks on airports, government buildings, shopping centers, supermarkets, banks, schools, and the power grid. These actions not only caused significant damage to cities, but also heightened the fear in society. To strike harder against the drug cartels, the Colombian government and the USA Drug Enforcement Administration, DEA, collaborated to eliminate Rodriguez Gacha, one of the Medellin cartel bosses, and his son. The Cali cartel quickly rose and began seizing Pablo's territory, even bombing his home. The explosion severely affected his daughter's hearing, leaving Pablo exhausted and yearning for peace, seeking to negotiate. Meanwhile, Colombian President Gaviria, wanting to survive Pablo's frantic assassination attempts, was forced to reach an agreement with him and sign a treaty. He also enacted a new constitution in 1991, prohibiting the extradition of Colombian citizens to the USA. Pablo surrendered to the Colombian government under the condition of only a 5-year prison sentence, to be served in a prison he had constructed called La Catedral. This prison was as luxurious as a hotel, with a helicopter pad, a soccer field, a gym, a bar, a sauna, a disco, and even a small chapel and natural waterfall. Pablo even set up a massive playground for his daughter, who visited frequently, and installed a powerful telescope to watch and call his family, possibly the earliest version of a video call. Besides frequent family visits, Pablo regularly hosted parties in the prison, with all-night festivities being a typical scene in his prison. Furthermore, the prison's location on a mountaintop offered a beautiful view, overlooking the entire Medellin. The steep mountain, shrouded in fog after 6 p.m., made it hard to stage a sudden nighttime attack. During the day, with no fog, everything at the foot of the mountain was visible, making an attack challenging. Meanwhile, Pablo had an enormous arsenal. In addition to the government-deployed military, he had his private guards ensuring security, turning his time in prison into a golden era. With ample security, he had no fear of government pursuit or assassination attempts, by rivals allowing him to earn 7.2 billion USD within 12 months. Today, this prison is a famous tourist attraction in Colombia. Suspecting that 2 of his senior aides had stolen 3 tons of cocaine, he had them beaten to death, their bodies dismembered and burned. To mask the smell of burning, he deliberately hosted a barbecue that night. On July 10, 1992, the Colombian government discovered the bodies of the 2 aides. Realizing there was a traitor among his ranks, Pablo had 22 more people disappear within 2 days. His brazen attitude left the Colombian government no choice but to decide to transfer him to a regular prison. Pablo staunchly refused. A few days later, the Colombian president dispatched 2 battalions of soldiers to surround the prison and sent the deputy justice minister to negotiate, but he was kidnapped. When the deputy minister called the president, his hand trembled as a submachine gun was aimed at his forehead. The gunman, highly agitated, was ready to operate the radio to order widespread terror across Medellin. This gunman was the chief assassin, nicknamed Sailor Popeye, responsible for killing over 1,000 people. On July 22nd, the 4th Army Brigade approached the prison at 3 a.m., leading to a fierce conflict. 2 officials were rescued, but Pablo disguised himself as a woman, donned a wig, climbed a 5-meter wall in the backyard, and vanished into the morning mist, commencing his life on the run. Over the next 16 months, thousands of soldiers and police officers combed Medellin, executing 11,000 search warrants and setting up 4,000 checkpoints, yet Pablo remained elusive. Someone always tipped off Pablo an hour or 2 before the police acted. His extraordinary abilities and extensive bribery, especially among those hunting him, made him nearly untouchable. With no alternative, the Colombian military formed a special 600-member task force. The USA also dispatched the Joint Special Operations Command, including Navy SEALs and Delta Force, along with military intelligence to Colombia to capture Pablo. Pablo's enemies also banded together to form Los Pepes, funded by Pablo's rival, the second largest drug cartel in Colombia, the Cali cartel. These individuals, dangerous drug traffickers and terrorists like Pablo, created a unique historical alliance. The CIA, DEA, Los Pepes drug cartel, and the Colombian government collaborated, sharing intelligence and even the USA Special Forces operational guidance across 3 continents. However, they still could not capture Pablo. Los Pepes' goal of finding Pablo differed from the government's. They primarily aimed to assassinate Pablo, seize his territory, and sell cocaine. They employed Pablo's own tactics of killing anyone loyal to him. In December 1992, the Medellin cartel endured 10 bombings. In 1993, Bogota and Medellin faced 20 bombings. Over 300 of Pablo's associates were killed, including lawyers, accountants, and henchmen. Simultaneously, vast assets were destroyed and seized, including large cocaine quantities and Pablo's homes. Pablo's family and friends were also targeted with 2 of his mother's farms bombed. In essence, their actions mirrored Pablo's as they reaped significant benefits and committed numerous crimes. Ultimately, the French government provided a large quantity of high-tech tracking and advanced eavesdropping equipment, capable of pinpointing someone's location within 3 minutes. Pablo, with his exceptional skills, quickly learned of this and never exceeded 3 minutes per call, often making calls while in a moving car. By the time Colombian police pinpointed his location, he was already 10 kilometers away. On December 2nd, 1993, 2 days after his 44th birthday and his 7th appearance on Forbes' list of the world's richest Colombian police, successfully traced a call he made that lasted over 3 minutes. The reason for the extended call remains unknown, but it no longer mattered. Police swiftly approached a middle-class neighborhood in Medellin and identified the house where Pablo was hiding. Pablo, armed, spotted the police outside the window, and they saw him. With only 1 bodyguard, Pablo jumped out the window and ran barefoot across the rooftop. As he prepared to shoot at the police, his chance vanished. He was shot in the leg and torso, with a fatal bullet hitting his right ear. Thus ended the life of drug lord Pablo Escobar. All Colombian and USA police on the scene cheered "Long live Colombia." Some said it was Colombia's greatest moment. Others called Pablo's death the end of the drug and violence era. However, drug shipments to the USA did not decrease. The Cali cartel replaced Pablo as the new drug empire, having learned from Pablo's mistakes, disguising as businessmen to trade drugs and limiting violence. Colombian authorities estimate that from 1989 to 1993, the Medellin cartel killed over 5,500 people. At one point, to oppose the Colombian government's extradition treaty, Pablo announced a bounty for killing police officers, offering 2 million pesos for each officer killed, leading to the deaths of 550 innocent officers. In early 1990, Medellin was the world's most violent city, with 380 murders per 100,000 people annually. Up to 400 people were killed every weekend. But within a year of Pablo's death, Medellin's murder rate dropped by 80%. Thus, for most Colombians, Pablo was their nightmare. After Pablo's death, 25,000 people attended his funeral, mostly poor Medellin residents he had helped. In Medellin, some still fondly call him Pablo. In Juni's commercial area, T-shirts and mugs bearing Pablo's image are best-selling souvenirs. Pablo's grave is always clean, tidy, and adorned with fresh flowers. Although his aid to the poor was to build his reputation and run for president, Pablo is remembered as a ruthless killer, yet also a generous person. Once, while on the run, he burned $2 million overnight to keep his daughter warm. Now, Pablo's mansion lies in ruins. When someone disregards the law and social norms, they are bound to meet a tragic end. A person wielding near unlimited wealth and force without restraint enters an extremely dangerous state. As Pablo's power and fortune swelled, he dreamed of ruling Colombia. Had he succeeded, would his next step have been to dominate the world? A person without limits, unbound by rules, is like a wild horse set loose. destined to harm others and themselves. What do you think of this story? Leave your thoughts below for everyone to see. Don't forget to like and subscribe to support me. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.